Welcome back to another of the Uncertainty of podcasts. My name's Scott Cuthbert. I'm a co-founder with Safepedia. And today's topic is safety management systems. And we've got two guest speakers today, Gary. We've got Heather Kahle and Patrick Robinson. And last time, what we've been exploring in the Uncertainty of show has been the age of cognitive complexity. And last month, we introduced human and organization performance, HOP principles. HOP is an approach that emphasizes learning from everyday work to make effective changes and build safety capacity. HOP is grounded in 5 key principles. People make mistakes, blame fixes nothing, context drives behavior, and learning and improving is vital, and how we respond matters. So HOP principles can act as a compass by helping prioritize learning how work is truly performed, engage workers as experts, encourage looking beyond traditional lagging indicators to shift towards effective systemic improvements. Using HOP principles, we can begin understanding why certain conditions persist and can pursue effective co-created goals and solutions. So the topic today is the uncertainty of safety management systems. Questions that you may have causing uncertainty in your mind. Does my company or organization legally need one? What operational resources are required to run and sustain an SMS? And how can an employer ensure the SMS actually helps and doesn't hinder safety and profitability?
Okay. Okay, so let me get going here. So last month, what I also introduced as well is the Kahle framework. And the Kahle framework gives us a really deeper look at what really happens in the real world. So today, we're going to focus on the right side, where the real world is stable and predictable. And because outcomes are repeatable, we can strengthen robustness with a safety management system applying if-then causal relationships. SMS design and development takes place in the Kahle complicated domain, where experts can analyze risk, develop safety policies, standards, processes, rules, and procedures. So we're going to have a conversation about SMS, and as Scott has already done, we're going to welcome our 2 guests back. So last month we had Heather on, and so welcome to the show again, Heather.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, and just to give you a brief background for those people that fortunately weren't on last month's show, and I do recommend that you watch it. Heather, for over 30 years, saw safety through the regulator's lens. So she was immersed in helping employees with a myriad of challenges and seeing firsthand what works and also what doesn't. Now, her passion and mission is helping businesses harness the means and power of operational learning to transform both safety and performance. And we also have Patrick Robinson. So Patrick, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. And currently, Patrick is developing a contractor safety management course that is in the validation phase with a boot camp sponsored by Safepedia. I'm engaged with that, and so is Heather bit. We're helping Patrick look at perhaps building a component called Safety Professional as a Change Agent. So let's start by talking about the first question that Scott posed. Does my company or organization legally need an SMS? Heather, what do you think?
Thanks for that, Gary, and great to be back. And welcome to everybody joining us. That's a great question, Gary. Whether legally an SMS is required, quite honestly, depends on the jurisdiction and the industry itself. Many industries we know out there, like aviation, maritime, rail, oil, gas, nuclear, there's many. They already have legal mandates for an SMS. Aviation, they have had their SMS requirements in place since already the 60s. And for areas of industry like healthcare, where they don't have that formal requirement, we're actually increasingly seeing some of these industries adopt an approach that can actually kind of augment their safety program and expand it and really give it some discipline and direction. So we're starting to see it become more broadly implemented. And another great one in healthcare is what's going on in the UK with the national health system.
Right. So my understanding is that a lot of industries have essentially enforced this. You must have this in here, but talking to really small and medium-sized organizations, it doesn't sound like they legally need one. So why bother? Why don't we just end our show here? Well, I think if we did, we'd be doing a disservice here. So I think we need one, Heather. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I really think it goes beyond compliance. So some people might be thinking, I don't have time for it, or, like, let's just achieve what is required by the regulator. But I would say an SMS really is essential. Traditionally, safety focuses on compliance, rule following, checking the box, making sure we have the administrative processes in place, and it becomes a fallacy, though, that if we have all the paperwork in place and we continue with our rule following, that automatically equates to safety. Now, I know it definitely helps, but a safety management system provides that structure and really helps with that structure to build safety capacity. And so what it aims to really do is align. You've got probably a lot of little bits and pieces already in place. You're probably already doing inspections, audits, some sort of risk assessment. And what an SMS can do is kind of bring that all together to make it overall be much more effective. It can help with a whole bunch of things. Continuous improvement, because it's not just, find and fix and then we're done. It's keep going, right? So identifying hazards, managing risks in the workplace on an ongoing basis, embeds learning right into daily operations, and then actively engages the employees and stakeholders throughout the levels, which can be really insightful. And an SMS is really not designed to be reactive. It's really designed to be more proactive, and it can help with standardization and meaningful conversations when safety team members change. And last but certainly not least is it will help in the goal of achieving compliance, and I would say it will achieve it goes beyond that to exceed compliance requirements. I like to think of it as a blueprint for a house. So just as the blueprint outlines the design, the structure, what you need, to build a house, an SMS provides similar guidelines, similar framework to ensure that what you're trying to do is organized to actually achieve it. So I look at it as the SMS being the foundation, and it's the platform where everything can evolve from.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some thoughts.
All right. So let's talk a bit about how HOP can complement an SMS. You have some thoughts around that?
Yeah, I'd basically add, Scott introduced or reintroduced the principles at the outset, and I'd say that they really nicely complement an SMS, and it's about embedding the operational learning right into your framework. HOP, the kind of the hallmark of it is it really is focusing around understanding like normal everyday work, your first bullet. And so when we get into the context of work, talking to the people that know the work or do the work, or for this call, what we're going to be talking about is contractors, talking to the contractors, you really getting some great insights, and then that can really lead us into learning. It expands the focus from being just compliance-based to learning, which is where the real benefits come in and can really help evolve safety practices. So I recommend to those that I work with that together they can really be helpful, helping to engage contractors and employees as experts who, doing the work really have some great insights. And I think I'll be giving a little bit of a template or a blueprint for how that could look like. But if you can embed HOP right up at the front end, front load your processes, your outcomes will be much easier. And you'll find with any SMS, there's definitely some administration, but adding HOP can actually serve to kind of lower the administration part of it and actually declutter some of the rules that we may not find that we need. So overall, I recommend SMS and add in HOP where you can to really expand the focus to learning.
Well, thanks for that. And so we've talked a bit about the why in SMS is really good, some of the what's, but we also like to be practical people here too. So can you provide a couple of practical examples where this has happened?
Sure, yeah. So at the beginning of this year, or the beginning of 2024, I was helping a company with an investigation. And to illustrate these principles, like the scenario is you've got a like, so it's a construction site, let's say, and you've got a gravel pit where trucks are being triaged in the wee hours of the morning. It was 2 a.m., between like 2 and 3 a.m. And so you've got a contractor in a pickup truck radioing the operators to say, what load they're supposed to be picking up. And on one occasion, what had happened is the radio signal was dropped, so they couldn't get the call through to the driver. And so the person on the radio goes over to the dump truck and, speaks directly to the driver, giving the instructions. And then, steps down from the driver's window, backs away, and then unfortunately, a number of things transpired, and unfortunately the truck ended up hitting the contractor that normally would be on the radio in the pickup truck. And so there was a number of people that came together from senior management through to the safety team and a number of other supervisors, and the regulator was there as well. And we were going to be talking about what had transpired, and everyone was really kind of believing that we're just going to be talking about the incident. I said, as we get going on this, I'd really like to understand the work. So not on the day of, but the day before or even the week before. So at that point, everyone got really engaged, and they're like, oh, okay, well, this is how we do the work. And, and they were sitting up and really getting engaged and explaining how it goes. And then even senior management was like, bring in a lead, bring in the guys that do the work. And so we really ended up having a great conversation with people who do the work and know the work, and people who oversee the work, and people who direct the work. And so with all those perspectives in the room, we really could get a good handle on the work. And overall, at the end of it, we got a really nice kind of understanding of the work, and I want to say like a sequence of events to understand how the events unfolded. But more than that, we were able to, with a high degree of certainty, kind of narrow in to some of the underlying conditions that contributed to it. Number one, the radio signal dropping, and then number two, hours of the day. And what was really interesting about that is I've used this case study a few times, and I've talked about how, initially they were blinded by the light, and you may have heard that expression before. And literally, there was discovery of a burnt out light bulb in the yard. And so there was a lot of focus on the burnt out light bulb that was in the yard, and believing that if they just had more light, then this wouldn't have happened. But we know when it comes to being struck by anything, the number one factor is being proximal to the thing that can hit you. And so when we discovered what drew the contractor into the working space, there was a lot of, light bulbs going off. Like, we really began to effectively understand what was going on. And so that's how, HOP in an SMS can really help. It really embeds the learning. It engages workers, supervisors, and directors across the agency. And it, in the end, will come up with more effective prevention measures than just, going through a traditional process where, which might sometimes be more focused on blame or just individual actions and choices. And then in another situation, working with a large
Let me just stop you
manufacturer.
there.
Oh,
Can I
sure.
just stop you there? Because what your story just reminded me of is what we did last month when we introduced the HOP principles and we looked at whether we want to analyze or we wanted to probe. And I think this is a great example where you started to probe with people and you started to look at the systemic conditions. And that just revealed a whole bunch of information that probably would have remained hidden if we have just gone through analytical point of view and just simply checked off different things. So thanks for that. And you said you got a second story?
Yeah, just another quick one. Working with a manufacturer that were plagued with operational issues around moving equipment. Part of the operational issues was something that we're probably all familiar with: soft tissue injuries or musculoskeletal injuries. And so they brought my team in to help them understand what the problem was. So we did a learning team exercise. And again, we had the stakeholders from across the organization in the room, and we worked through, the understanding the work, normal everyday work, and then we used something I'll talk about in a little while, Spark, going through the successes, the problems, and the adaptations to really understand the work. And again, it really led to unearthing some key findings that enabled them to move beyond choices and individual behaviors into looking at labeling, the onboarding process, quality, traffic in the area, and some maintenance factors. Those are just some of the factors that emerged that really led to some, significant aha moments and being able to really focus in on the right areas.
Yeah, so I think there's some great takeaways that you've got in your two stories.
Yeah, that really sums it up nicely. Shifting the focus, we might not be directly blaming, but in some cases there can be focus on simple surface and seeable factors. Often that amounts to like looking at a tool that wasn't there or was broken, or individual actions. And then learning from the work is done, not just from what goes wrong, because very rarely do things go wrong when we think about all the things that go right. And then looking at the system, not just those surface seeable symptoms, involving the people across the system, which can then lead to the last bullet, broader impact. So it's a nice summary.
Yeah, your comment about system over symptoms, that's that thing about we're always looking for the single root cause, particularly when we do RCA, root cause analysis. And then I think we realize that it's just not one, it's not one cause, but more than that, we're just maybe looking at the symptoms, not even the cause. So I really like the approach that you're using, which gives us that broader impact, that let's look at all of the different conditions that are creating the situation that occurred. Right? It's like that. Patrick, let me get you involved in this here. Do you have some examples as well?
I do, and this example touches on nearly all the takeaways that Heather just mentioned. So technology and product advancements have and will continue to have a major impact on workplaces, and their adoption is frequently way out in front of legislation, or said another way, just mere basic compliance. So this example was back from when high-risk industries transitioned from safety belts to full body harnesses for fall arrest purposes. And employers were way ahead of the minimum standard and made improvements to their sites without waiting for the legislation to dictate. So I'll explain basically what happened. I'll take you back to the late 90s in the Canadian oil sands sector. And what happened was safety supply vendors put on a series of in-person seminars on the broad topic of preventing falls in the construction and maintenance sectors. These sessions were attended by executives, managers, and safety professionals from clients and contractors active in the Alberta oil sands industry. Part of the presentation that was put on included a practical exercise of hoisting volunteers in a tripod in both traditional waist belts and then in full body harnesses, keeping in mind that full body harnesses were new technology at this point. They were very new in the marketplace and certainly not broadly adopted. And it was only through physically feeling the vast differences in load on the body between the two technologies did it become just patently obvious that a rethink of fall arrest equipment and the standards around that equipment was needed. So within a matter of months, the clients and their contractors had moved en masse to the superior products and the better work standards. By contrast, it took years for Alberta legislation to catch up and specify the things that this industry had taken on simply out of obvious need once it was presented to them.
Yeah, great example. And I think what I really liked about Saferpedia, Scott, is the emails that I will get from you saying that here's a new piece of technology, whether it's just a new breathing device, and then you kind of host another webinar where that product can be explained and discussed. So I think it's trying to keep our small and medium-sized organizations up to speed. What's the latest technology out there? But Patrick, you make a great point where often the technology far exceeds how fast we have social change, legal change, all those sort of stuff here. So it's not necessarily waiting for those things, but how can we adopt quickly? And I think, to me, this is where an SMS, if you've got one in place, you can go beyond compliance and you can really support a quick adoption of some new, cool technology. I can also suggest, besides technology, it can also be supporting a new process. So your latest initiative involves contractor safety management. And that's a process to manage contractors safely. Well, as I'm showing in this diagram, and we'll call it CMS, we'll call it CSM. Oops, I think I got that wrong. I put CMS. It should be CSM. We'll get the acronyms right. Sorry about that. But that design and development also takes place in the Kinevin complicated domain. So maybe you can just share a bit about what is contractor safety management.
Sure. Well, just to get grounded a little bit, the use of contractors and gig workers continues to increase across nearly all sectors of the economy. Some basic stats: the global contingent workforce market is about $465 billion in 2022 dollars, with a projected, and here's the big one, the projected annual growth of about 9.6% through 2030. So imagine roughly 10% we're growing by all the way through 2030. So there's just a lot more risk. There's a lot more things to manage. In the construction industry, construction contractor market is growing at about 7.3% annually. And in the oil and gas sector, contracted services were $34 billion in 2023 and are expected to grow at around 6% annually. So just to set the framework that there's just more and more high-risk work being done by contractors, hence more of a need for better contractor controls. So regarding contractors and risk metrics, contractor fatality rates are 3.5 times higher than full-time employees in construction. So with the additional work, the additional risk comes the considerable downside. About 47% of serious workplace incidents involve contractors. So on the positive side, on the proactive side, companies that use a contractor pre-qualification system, whether internal or external, show about 20% fewer safety incidents. So what's the point of all this data? Well, your contractors are your business partners who make valuable contributions to your organization, its goals, and ultimately your success. Your contractors are key to your company's ability to anticipate, prepare for, respond, and adapt to changing conditions while keeping safe operations. So the ability to vet and manage collective risk with contractors is a core competency of a hiring company. So with these factors in mind, we've built out a course for small and medium-sized businesses to either start or to improve their contractor safety management systems.
Right. It sounds like it's also a bit of a two-way street, because we are probably addressing employers who are using contractors. But then if you are on this call and you are a contractor, it also sounds like you should have some sort of a CSM to manage your contract with your client. Okay, so let's move on to Scott's second question, which was, what operational resources are required to run and sustain? And let's start in your case, Patrick, a contractor safety management process.
Yeah, there's a handful of factors that are common to successful contractor management programs. So starting with the basics, first, establish a process owner. This is someone who coaches up your stakeholders and is the point person for implementing your contractor safety management standard. This person reports on progress and compliance to the organization and the sponsor. The second is make sure that your process owner is supported by this management sponsor. This is a senior leader, typically, who identifies the stakeholders that will basically run the CSM, assigns their responsibilities, and enables their success within the organization. The sponsor provides executive and corporate support to keep your contractor management system running and growing. So what I'm explaining here is essentially you have a taskmaster, a day-to-day quarterback who's supported by an executive to keep the CSM first, to get it implemented, and to keep all the stakeholders moving in the right direction. Then third, to hold all this effort together and to make these two roles as successful as they can possibly be, is to establish a contractor management standard, which is a set of company-specific requirements that identify the activities. So what sort of things are you going to do related to contractor management? Who is going to do those things, meaning the stakeholders? And what are their deliverables day by day, week by week, month by month? And what are the tools that are needed to implement and sustain? So tools might be an evaluation process or an evaluation checklist. It might be a contractor pre-qualification form or questionnaire that contractors fill out. So you need this combination of administrative and people to make the system run properly.
Well, thanks for that. And Heather, any insights on what operational resources are required to bring a HOP lens to a CMS?
Yeah, a couple ideas on that. But before doing that, I just wanted to circle back to Patrick. I just had a quick quick question. I loved your list, your analogy number one of the three main things that you need to be successful at this. That was really great. And then you were talking about the activities and the deliverables, and it might be pre-qualification. Have you seen a movement to a more automated pre-qualification system? Like, are they moving? Is there movement away from manual checklists into more like computerized systems? Has that been your observation?
Yeah, in high-risk industries, the ones that I'm most familiar with, there's fairly broad adoption of third-party registries in the marketplace, and they bring a combination of good and good and bad, I would say. They brought certainly a standardization of process, and have, I think, collectively raised the bar in terms of pre-qualification as a process. That said, there's genuine market concerns regarding the number and the administrative weight and the cost of compliance that I speak a little bit later in about in this presentation. But yes, by and large, the high-risk industries are serviced by a variety of technology companies that have automated the process to a fairly significant degree.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's helpful. I'm just wondering if that's one of the I guess that's one of the major considerations if companies are starting to move in that direction, you know, for like adoption of some of the things that you're talking about. That's that would influence what you're saying. So yeah, no, that's good insights on that. Gary, you were asking me about some operational resources to kind of infuse what I've been talking about with what Patrick's talking about. And to bring like a HOP framework or a HOP lens, we might call it, to SMS, and under that is contractor safety management. I think it's on this call, it's a bit of a foregone conclusion that SMSs are the way to go. If you think of them as an accordion file, like they're a repository, like they're not just a framework, but they can bring all your OHS, occupational health and safety program elements together to really help you be effective. And so if you've got already some version of that in place, then adding to it, you know, the adoption or at least the support or the beginning to embed some of the HOP principles. I know of some employers where they've taken a very nuanced approach. Let's just, on this year, you know, we're going to focus on blame solves nothing, you know, and so let's just, how does not blaming our workers look like inside our contractor safety management process? Or what could it look like inside of SMS, inside inspections? You know, where we look beyond worker choices and worker behaviors. So, you know, that kind of thing. So supporting the or endorsing, you know, HOP in general, the principles, the training, you know, creating some time and space for it, that would be the number one thing to do. Number two would be now if you're like thinking, let's do this, let's bring HOP into our SMS or our CMS. We now need some tools. Like HOP is bounded by the principles, but behind those principles, there's a number of tools and a number of methods and some training to help embed that learning. Two that I do regularly that really offer a lot of insight are talk-throughs. And that's basically, again, understanding some of the challenges, the successes, the wins, you know, with the people who are doing the work, and getting them to talk through it. It's not just observation. I think, you know, if we ask ourselves, who likes to be observed? Nobody really likes somebody standing there watching people work. So it's not an observation process. It's a walk through, talk through. Help me to understand and get in your shoes to accomplish the work that you're doing. And another one is understanding the rules and the gaps. I mean, we've talked already that whether or not it's an SMS or whether or not it's, you know, how to lock out, that sometimes there's some deviations or, you know, steps that might not be completely in line with the rule. It's not to say that that is necessarily bad, but I think where the opportunity lies is understanding why there are gaps. And once we understand why some rules can be followed, maybe others can't, maybe we can learn from that to overall make some great improvements. So aside from bringing in, you've got endorsement, then you've got a toolbox of some tools. Then you want to hear about what's going on. I mean, when we're opaque about the work that's going on, learning can't happen. So we need to, embed some way to learn from the work that's going on. So I want to say like some sort of reporting framework that's user-friendly to encourage intentional conversations, and welcoming. I can think of a conversation I was with on the shop floor with the products or production supervisor, and somebody wasn't adjusting the table height to the right height, and we walked away, and the production supervisor was saying, well, they should be doing it, and I'm like, that was a great conversation opportunity. So not necessarily scolding or having reprisal or judgment, but just understanding work and creating protocols for that would be really good. And then changing the metrics. I mean, if we are always aiming at the same metrics, like how many lost time injuries we've had, or how many first aid reports we've had, or how many incident investigation EIRs we've had, we're all focusing on the negative. So changing some of the metrics to include some proactive, some leading edge, rather than just only lagging indicators can really help change our focus. And then something very practical that I offer is getting access to external support. So since the beginning of last year, we've been offering a HOP call. It's the last Wednesday of every month, and it's free, and it's conversations with practitioners and people in construction, healthcare, manufacturing, jumping on the call to say, this is what we're trying to do. Like, we're just learning this stuff. We're trying to embed it, and this is what we're doing, and this is what is working and what's not working. So those are some things that I might offer up to help embed, or at least get started on what a HOP lens could look like inside SMS and inside contractor safety management.
Well, our conversation today, just amongst us, it's got me thinking too, like that last point, where do you start? And in some cases, it's not like, oh, we're going to do this big change management launch. We're going to put in HOP, we're going to put in CSM or SM. No, it sounds to me that you could start in a different way. So let's talk a bit about that. And Heather, I'll give you a first shot. If you're going to introduce,
it's a great thing. Like the principles, the principles are just those 5 principles. But I mean, HOP is so much more than that. It's really the backbone of it is operational learning. And so you think, wow, that seems pretty daunting. Like, where do we even get started? And I would say, start small. Like you've kind of alluded to it. I mean, it can look like taking on this gigantic, weighty thing and not knowing where to start. But I think most of us would probably have some sort of occupational health and safety practices and protocols already. They might not be perfect. Maybe you're working on them. Maybe you're evolving them. Maybe you're realizing, wow, we don't have what we need, and you're just getting started. All the better. Get started and start small. So you can embed some better questions. We're providing you with some resources. There's a handout that we'll provide, as well as better questions. And if you just start with those 2 resources, you're going to start learning, and then having those conversations will lead you to ideas of where to start. Maybe it's you want to, rather than walking by somebody doing work and going, oh, the light bulb is burnt out. Maybe you would stop and ask a question. That could help. Maybe when it comes to doing audits, you don't stand there with a clipboard anymore, just taking notes of processes and talking about injuries that you've had. Maybe it is more of let's just turn that on its head, and let's have a learning team where we can bring in the team and learn about what's going on across the division. And starting small, and kind of goes hand in hand with that, is focus on simplicity. I would highly recommend pick 1 or maybe 2 principles at most, and just start working away at it gradually as to what it could look like, rather than taking on too much and going, oh, we tried that and it's really not working for us. So I would really emphasize simple and small.
Yeah. I think there's also another point too, is don't feel that if you're going to implement change, it has to be this linear sequential process. We got to do this before we do that. I think you could look at, as you said, Heather, we're already doing this. Let's put that as part of our house.
Mhm.
Let's put in this, let's add that. And as you add your different components, I'm sure you're going to go like, oh, this is how this fits with this, how this fits with
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
And that's how.
And I would
that will
add,
build your house. Yeah.
yeah, I would add to exactly what you're saying, that in some cases, it's not even an ad. It's, we're our inspection process, we have a checklist, or we have a rotation schedule, we have a way of doing inspections. And can we do what we're doing a little bit better? So maybe it initially isn't starting off with adding like a new component, but it's just boosting or enhancing something that you're already doing, as an example.
All right. And Patrick, what about the contractor safety management process? Got some thoughts about that and trying to implement that?
Yeah, related to contractor management frameworks, particularly for small and medium-sized companies. Be intentional about the activities that will work best in your circumstances. And that includes decisions around some of the things that we had mentioned earlier around technology, third-party technology. When it comes to contractor safety management, you're better off implementing a couple of activities and doing them very well instead of taking on a large number of activities and finding you're unable to sustain them appropriately. What ends up happening is you end up not doing really any of them very well. So, for example, nearly everyone sees the value of performing post-project contractor performance reviews. A project comes and goes, or a particular scope gets completed. You're bidding adieu to some contractors, and you want to collect some lessons learned. Nearly everybody sees value in that activity, yet historically speaking, it's a lagging activity with even the biggest and the best organizations due to time and budget and human resource constraints. So when you're starting out, take on those things that, one, are going to provide the most value, and that you're really sure you can adequately resource to make sure that they sustain and continue to provide value year in, year out. Then build out from there.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think that leads us on to Scott's third and last question. How can an employer ensure that the SMS actually helps and doesn't hinder safety and profitability? So Patrick, any ideas where in your case as CSM could become a bureaucratic problem?
Yes, and related to contractor safety management, there's a bunch of examples in this realm. One that touches nearly every contractor in high-risk industries is the pre-qualification process that we touched on briefly earlier. And it can be a source of frustration and high cost due to, one, bureaucratic overreach and registry compliance requirements that are typically one size fits all approaches instead of customized to contractor type or contractor risk level. Small and medium-sized contractors, in a very real sense, face significant barriers to entry if the administrative load and the cost of compliance at the pre-qualification stage is too high. In a more day-to-day management sense, you can't cover off every situation that a client representative managing contractors in the field may encounter with a contractor management standard alone. Ideally, your CMS will provide an effective framework for the most capable decision makers to excel. So, for example, in dynamic workplaces like construction sites, access to work areas is a day-to-day issue that needs collaboration and coordination by clients and contractors working together. There's only so much space on a work site, so coordination of the work, the needed equipment, the materials is critical. Mesh points need to be managed, and an SMS can only help to a point. Eventually, the organizers of the work have to consider the circumstances of the moment and decide on actions accordingly. An example might be where two separate contractors require access to the same geographical area of a site. Conflict over whose work proceeds and whose gets moved needs to be addressed. So your contractor management system, no matter how well written, no matter how comprehensive, cannot address every field contingency.
Yeah, true. Heather, some thoughts?
I want to just pick up on three really amazing points that Patrick has said, and I just want to reemphasize about the, it's a little bit of a different language, but after action reviews. So those post-work reviews, couldn't agree with you more that they're so important. But sadly, due to time constraints, I mean, you know, time is money. I think one of the most valuable steps of having that post-work conversation of, you know, what didn't show up, you know, what were some of the barriers, what were some of our wins, what were some of our, you know, what did we had to do to make this work? I mean, we had to, you know, swap in this or swap in that. Like, some of the biggest lessons can come from those conversations. And I think if, as you say, we can, you know, pick on a couple of things to work on, that would be one of the really great learning nuggets. You also mentioned that you can't cover every situation, and that is like the hallmark of what I talk about. And often I'm talking about rules, but it's the same thing with an SMS or contractor safety management system. You're not going to cover off every eventuality. And I think being nimble, and then you refer to it beautifully a little bit later, you said something like, you have to consider the circumstances and then decide accordingly. And that is really, I mean, kind of, that is how HOP meshes in. What happens is sometimes, though, when you consider the circumstances and you're trying to, you know, act in a way that seems according, sadly, in hindsight, if it doesn't benchmark well against the rules, it can look like non-compliance. But I think you've raised some really really good points that I just wanted to re-echo. In terms of the question of you know, what are some stumbling blocks, I would say overemphasis on compliance. I don't want to go on record as saying compliance is important. If you've ever been visited by WorkSafeBC, a safety or hygiene officer, we all know how important compliance is, and there's very many things where having systems set up, OHS programs, SMS, lockout, fall protection, etc., offer great value. But I think sometimes compliance overlooks operational safety requirements. And when we focus on one, it's to the detriment of the other. You know, one can lead to like a checkbox exercise where we're like, you know, whatever that looks like. Maybe we have the tools, we've done our toolbox talk, we've got our high vis vests, you know, and then the goal becomes meeting the standard, which is really baseline. It's actually just the minimum. And so that becomes the North Star or the goal rather than making meaningful improvements. And I think another downfall can be sometimes with an SMS that equates in your mind to, oh, lots of paperwork, we need a binder and that sort of thing, and it doesn't have to. So I think the belief that it has to take significant time, effort, documentation, information to gather, maintain, revise, update. I mean, those are all things for an evolving safety process, yes, but it doesn't need to be the central focus of it. And I think if it's too heavy on the admin, that actually erodes the whole goal, and ultimately it will erode profitability. And then I would say anything top down, where like, this is how we're going to do it. In my world, I call that doing things to people and for people versus doing it with them and among them. On the one side, the 2 and the 4 results in some resistance very often and lack of sustainability. But if you're doing the process with the people and among the people, getting their feedback, input, ideas, suggestions on how to augment it, what works, what doesn't work, that can really lead to great efficiencies because, involving the conversation, they really understand where those gaps and opportunities lie. And then, incident reporting, the lagging indicators, talking about incident rates. I mentioned that earlier, and it's not to say that we don't look at incidents. Works APC and, first aid reporting isn't going away. But I think when we emphasize on that metric and maybe have a goal of zero harm, that is actually detrimental. When we use injuries as our primary success factor or success indicator, what it can lead to is underreporting. Like I have an example where I was working with an employer and we were just on it was early days, we were just on a plant tour, and beside their stories, they're talking about suggestion boxes and ideas and hearing from the people. On the other side of a time clock, there was a big how many days since our last injury. And I think putting those two beside each other, they actually can work against each other. Because on the one hand, you don't want to hear reports about injuries that can, possibly, take away the opportunity to get, a coffee, a Subway sandwich, a gift card, or what have you. So I would say striking a balance between looking at injuries as well as some of the leading indicators can, help keep a balanced perspective.
Yeah, I guess if I can add one story I've got is working with a VP that was in charge of SMS. And the message that he gave the troops down below, being a top-down thing, is do what you have to do to keep me out of jail. And so his advice that he got was from the legal people. And the legal people saying, you got to document everything. You've got to have rules there so we can go to court and we could show, oh, this is a rule that we had in place, but it was violated, so you're okay. And that caused a lot, as you can imagine, consternation in the organization. Well, wait a minute. If we get into saying we're going to build a document that covers every incident, and that's what the frontline workers complain about, because their manual, which they could use to be able to put in their back pocket, they couldn't put in the back pocket. It was getting so big, so they left it in the truck, which is fine. And when the safety coordinator saw that, why don't you carry that with you? Well, it's too big. Oh, I have a solution. It's a technological solution. We'll just digitize everything. So it sounds cool, but it wasn't, because that assumed that everybody had a smart device and everybody knew how to work that device. And all of a sudden production slowed down. Well, I had to go and check the digital, database to see that if I was violating a rule or not. So it really got themselves into this bureaucratic quagmire. And I often think, and I like your idea of a house, and maybe it's a rule that we had when we had young kids. If you want to have a new toy, what existing toy are you going to give away? So keep it small. And that, if we had that sort of a guideline, maybe the SMS experts say, well, maybe we need to refine some things down and keep these Moore's guidelines as hard, fast rules. So again, these are some thoughts for the viewers to think about. The last thing I want to get into is, and this is probably more of a teaser, if you like, because we can expand on this probably next year, is that if you're going to implement a new or revise your existing SMS, how would you infuse HOP principles into each element? So can you kind of give us a bit of a teaser how you would do that, Heather?
I like what Gary said, Scott. This is just a bit of a teaser. We could do like a week-long webinar on how to do this, just for food for thought for the future. I think harnessing Patrick's examples and what we could do, I think it could be a fun example. So Gary's just highlighting on the screen just 2 elements. Really, SMS can be 8 elements, 10 elements. So I'm cognizant of the time, but I think if you take a look at what a traditional SMS focuses on, there's, in a nutshell, I mean, this is not it, and it's not necessarily negative. It's just, it is fact. It's neutral. It's objective. There's just a reliance on rules. There's a reliance on, that benchmark of maybe what's in the regulation, or maybe you have company policies and practices. And like tying in with what Patrick was saying earlier, that we can't always do everything. We can't cover off everything for every eventuality. Because of that, this is where we need to be flexible. So, a hop infused or like a hop informed kind of SMS blueprint does some of these other things that I'm showing on the screen. Kind of the backbone of Hop is learning. And the way that we learn is, think about Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs. I mean, he goes right into the trenches and understands about the work. And I think, he's always been an advocate for kind of what he would call blue collar jobs. And I think we tend to think we know about them because we maybe plan the jobs, but talking to the people that do the jobs, engaging the people that do the work to identify what they see out there, not just hazards, but the good things as well as, well, when I show up to work, I always have to do this to make it work or whatever, adaptations. What are the realities? Well, it's always bloody cold up here, or this is always tight, or someone's, such and such process contractor is always late. Like building conversations around that. So focusing on, the systemic contributing factors. So what I mean by that is, typically, we want to focus on the simplest factors, like what we see. Maybe it's kind of surface, and typically those are just the symptoms of what's going on. So if we can shift our focus to look at, the rules, the hardware, the environment, and things about the people, not just their choices, but their training, their background, other things. We get kind of a more holistic look at the concern or the win. I mean, it's not just always looking at what's bad. And then using dynamic tools to harness some of that stuff. I mean, I talked about learning teams. There's talk-throughs, and there's a whole number of other ways where we can engage the team and get to some of those real nuggets. And then very, very similar or building on that is for risk assessment. I mean, to do a risk assessment, you need to involve, people throughout the hierarchy in the organization, frontline, and then middle, and then maybe HR, operators, engineering, to really get a better understanding of the challenges, some of the hazards, the risks, and ultimately the opportunities that exist out there. So that all ties back to the backbone of HOP, which is really operational learning. So I just offer up some of those suggestions. But, maybe in a future course, we can get into what does it look like to identify your EH&S objectives, or how do we change our safe work procedures that seem so mundane and necessary, and how could we evolve those? So that's a conversation for a future time, I think.
Yeah, and I think what we would like, and maybe Scott, you can help us here, reaching out to the community, is what sort of things you would like to see us maybe talk about on these future shows? And if it is really going into more kind of an SMS HOP blueprint conversations, we can do that. Well, we're nearing the top of the hour. So, and being Christmas, we're going to give you a couple of gifts, because typically this is when we do the takeaways. And because we got 2 guests, I'm going to ask each guest to give away, or to give you some takeaways for each one. Patrick, can I start with you? What would be your takeaways?
So 3 things. As mentioned, start small and build on your early successes. Implement a couple of contractor management activities that bring your organization the most value, and do those very well. It's a better way to proceed than taking on too many activities and finding sustainment a problem. Second, engage your stakeholders as experts who know work as done. And these are the people that interact daily with your contractors and the contractors themselves. Then build on your contractor management system and consider where HOP principles can bring improvement. So, for example, a key HOP principle is the idea that context drives actions and decisions, meaning that people's actions are shaped by the systems, conditions, and organizational factors around them. So rather than focusing solely on individual choices or behaviors, examine the environment and the circumstances that influence those choices or behaviors. So, for example, if a contractor's performance is lacking, think carefully about the incentive structure that the contractor is operating in. Are they motivated only by short-term schedule and budget pressures? Or do they also understand that poor safety performance today can jeopardize business opportunities down the road?
Yeah, really, really, really good one. And Heather, I think your three are really cool because now you get into the how-tos with some cool action steps. How about sharing
Yeah,
those?
no, it's beautiful. Again, thanks for that segue, Patrick. I think that's like what we're saying. It resonates, right? And yeah, so I like to leave sometimes with some action steps, like a call to action. So ideally, if people want to give any of this a try and maybe feedback to us on a future call or reach out, any one of us, Scott, maybe if you're reaching out to Scott, we can have some great conversations about what's needed. So even just dedicating, I said dedicate, I'm suggesting to dedicate maybe 30 minutes for walkthrough, talk through. That's where, maybe on an inspection or when you're doing an audit or you're doing your toolbox talk or, where there's an opportunity to transfer information from, some incoming process, maybe the materials changed, maybe the scaffolding hasn't been set up, maybe I don't know, like there's been a delay in the project line. Wherever a conversation is needed, I'm suggesting to do a walkthrough, talk through, carve out 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, a defined amount of time where we're going to refrain from judging, saying that's wrong, don't do it that way, just understanding and try to really get in the shoes of the people. And, in my world, I call it, say, get inside the tunnel, get inside their tunnel to understand, like what Patrick was referencing, work as done. It's a label that, that we use to talk about what really happens out there in the real world. And then if you want to give that a go and you're stumbling, and you need help with anything, hop aligned or whatnot, let's reach out to the team or myself. Review a procedure. Review a procedure. I know we're Christmas now, but maybe into the new year, decide by the end of January that you're going to take a look at a procedure with a team. Does it even apply anymore? Does it even match with the realities of work or the environment? Is it too long? Is it accessible? Does it make sense? Like, does it actually help rather than hinder? We've been talking about helping and hindering with SMS, but on a small scale, is the rule a hindrance or a help? And I think if we can have rules that help and support work, that can be a big win as well. And then from that, you want to maybe take a look at a recent first aid report, maybe an injury or instant investigation, an EIIR, and look at what you've done. I mean, I was just reviewing some healthcare ones, and they might on the surface say, well, they weren't moving the client from the chair to the bed properly and they hurt their back, and so bend your knees or pay attention to your posture. Like, what are your EIR saying? Like, are they saying pay attention, be careful, complacency, fatigue, busyness, distraction? Or is there a focus on learning what the real work is going on? I mean, if you hearken back to what I was talking about earlier about that, it was a sad, an unfortunate incident where getting hit by a dump truck. But, it started out with focusing on a light bulb that was burnt out versus understanding why the person had to approach the truck. And we did it not in a day-long process. We did it in a 1-hour process. People were coming in from out of town. And so we took a look at the incident and we focused on the learning. We understood what the task was, what the job was, not just on the day of the incident, but what did they do last week? Understand where the gaps and opportunities are. And then we shifted our focus by understanding the work from the light bulb to the system. So we went from symptoms, which, you know, the person that got struck, when it comes to blind spots on a dump truck, they could have been wearing, you know, Christmas tree lights, and it would not have helped. So having more ambient lighting in the yard isn't the sole answer. I'm not saying it's not one of the layers that could be helpful, but there was a lot of ambient light. So we shifted the focus by looking at normal work from symptoms to system, which I think is pretty cool. And I mean, we walked away hugging from that meeting, where we were actually talking about some really practical, attainable, achievable goals. Yeah, so those are my 3 things. Do a walkthrough, engage with your people in the store, on the floor, look at a procedure, and look at an incident, and get started with that. And we'd love your I would personally love your feedback. And if you need help with any of it, reach out.
Yeah. And so one more takeaway that Heather has offered, and we did this last month as well. She does have this pocket guide that's available, and Scott will add that to the YouTube as well as the LinkedIn. So people can just click the button and we set it up. You click on it and you can just download the PDF just like that. Okay, so very efficient here. So we've gone a bit past the hour, but I think this has been hopefully very insightful for everybody. But so now I'm going to turn this back over to you, Scott.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Gary, for walking us through that, and thank you, Heather and Patrick, for joining today. As Gary mentioned, we'll have Heather's resource in the description for people to download. We'll have Heather and Pat's coordinates so people can reach out. And Gary, at the beginning, you touched on the course that Patrick's putting together, and I know he's got like a tremendous amount of experience. He's worked with some of the largest owners, you know, in the industry, some of the largest contractors down to some of the smaller ones. And whether you've been in the industry for 30 years or 30 days, I know you'll get value out of taking Patrick's course. He's putting so much work into it. I applaud all the effort. You know, so we'll have some information on that too, so how people can sign up for that course, or at least pre-register, you know, by reaching out to Patrick and letting them know that they're interested. But definitely encourage everybody to take a peek at that as well. So thanks so much. I know it's sort of the Friday before the holiday break, so really appreciate everybody joining this morning, and wish everybody happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year.
Happy holidays, everyone. See you next year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas.